introduction. We are glad that Roboyo came here to our event. Roboyo is one of our key partners in Germany in implementing IDP product together with RPA. We want to welcome Fabian here and Maxime, who has quite interesting questions. Yeah, and maybe Fabian, if you can introduce yourself, like your role and
yeah. So hi everybody, I'm Fabian. I'm working for Roboyo in Nuremberg. We are currently, I think, the largest full focus only on automation service provider in the world. We have locations all over the world, in USA, DACH, Western Europe, in APAC, in Australia, and we're focusing on automation, and in our terminology it has become hyper-automation, and hyper-automation basically including RPA, IDP, process mining, so all of the technologies that we've heard today are part of our stack, including all the consulting work that is needed, like what we heard from Maxime, like what is interesting and relevant in this space. And yeah, my role in this context is basically being a senior manager, so that means we have a team of automation experts from consulting and technology trying to tackle industry problems. And on top of that, like, I'm mostly dealing with IDP, so which especially honors me to be part of this ABBYY event, because this is part of my daily work. How can we implement this in an enterprise context, in a global scale, and in a, like, as we've seen in the hype cycle, already stage of productivity and not falling for any traps basically on the way. Short or long for me and Roboyo.
Well, that's really good. So thank you, Fabian, for joining this last bit of our day here. So we're really honored to have you as well. And you know, we talked about it briefly last week about what we were going to discuss for this panel. And it seems it has already piqued some interest because I had people asking me, or maybe even ask Fabian the question, RPA is dead. And that's actually not just me that said that. So to kick things off, that is definitely one of the topics I wanted to touch on. So it was actually Phil Hurst from HFS Research that I would say on a bigger scale kind of said, you know, RPA is gone, the era is over. For one of the reasons that he mentioned was, you know, UiPath, for example, always had the notion, or at least the perspective that they, well, at least in marketing slogan, let's call it what it is, was a bot for every user, a bot for every single person. That's what they went for. And you know, recently, I think it's about 4 or 5 months ago, they stopped using that. They transformed into something else. So that made me wonder if you know, my vision on it for RPA was always that it was a band-aid to fix the problem that the fact is, you know, you had back in the day a lot of legacy systems, you still have those. But the main systems within businesses didn't have any kind of real integration capabilities. They weren't ready for API integrations. It was very hard to get data out, very hard to get data in. That's what RPA was really good at, but it was also very fragile, in my opinion. So what are your general thoughts when you hear, you know, RPA is dead, that cycle's over in terms of, it was also a bit of hype, in my opinion, too. How would you look at that? Because you have worked with it quite a lot, if I understand that correctly. Would you agree, or do you see it differently?
So I think, like, the news RPA stat also reached us, like, as a team. So basically, and it was like, as you can imagine, a lot of people were like, oh, goddamn, that's our main business. It's dead. Like, what are we going to do now? And the thing is that I would say this is actually true, because as we have experienced it, like 6 or 7 years ago when we started, like, who we've been talking to in organizations, what cases they've been looking for. So basically, our main points of context into an organization was a single business unit, even not a business unit, maybe just like a small fraction, 3 to 4 people. They have a very manual process. It's coming up every now and then, so you have to do something. Let's do this. And then we automated it, and then there came a new business unit, again, a small fraction of this process. And I think as we experience it basically today is that the people that are contacting us are no longer like these small groups coming for small processes, which is a perfect fit for RPA basically, because no IT department would waste their budget on investigating how to automate it, how to integrate this little piece perfectly. So the audience that we are talking to, the clients that are approaching us, are from a full different perspective.
Yeah.
So basically what we've seen today in terms of timeline. what's end-to-end, what's happening end-to-end, so their focus has shifted. And with that, also the usage of RPA in this end-to-end process. So this is how we experienced it. And for that, I would say, yes, what we've been doing for a long time isn't what we're doing right now in terms of RPA.
So, maybe a more apt term to use instead of RPA is that RPA has found its plateau of productivity. And we are talking about, I guess we should clarify that we are talking about what I would call traditional RPA. The screen scraping, moving data from one screen to another, the vendors have evolved as well. So I guess my other question would be, you're saying we're not doing what we used to do before anymore. We're now doing it very differently. How has that evolved over time, and where do you see that going next? In like the next year or two? What do you think the usefulness is going to be? How are people going to continue to use all of those bots they typically have? Because a lot of companies have a lot of bots that they've purchased. Do you see continued usage, or do you think they'll actually move to other systems, other platforms to do their orchestration and automation purposes?
So I think that especially in like what you're saying, like the purpose of RPA, like transferring data from one layer to another, from one system to another, has even more come into focus as of today's requests that we're seeing, because as we've been doing a lot of RPA for cases where you wouldn't necessarily use RPA, it was just an easy to access technology for business users, for us, easy to explain, like guide, and I think you said that before, like non-IT users to a IT environment. So look, this is what IT is, here's low code, you can use it, you can do something with it. This was an easy entry point, but we always also promoted RPA as a tool to overcome interfaces. Where no integration is there, why not use it in this area? And I think this is where we are at right now, because this is where RPA is getting pushed more or less. And in terms of what we see and what I already said, like the audience that we're talking to, way more people are coming with an IT background. So they are not asking, like if I tell them, let's do this with RPA, they are immediately raising their hands and saying like, there's an API for that. So why should I use like the Band-Aid if I don't have to? And this also, I think, shows like how people evolve in this space, because these questions are now also coming from COEs of RPA, because they all see their mission and vision to be for automation, not RPA only. So this is basically, I think the shift that we see is RPA more in its place, but the people that are working with it way more educated in terms of IT.
So what you're saying is they're more educated in terms of the landscape of tools that is available, and they understand what the purpose of RPA is, what it's good for, because I would also say that it still has definitely a purpose. It's a part of the toolkit that you should have. And so when you get that pushback, why would we use RPA? We can just use APIs. Recently, a lot of the RPA vendors have also moved into being much more API focused, whilst you also have, I would say, more conventional API integration systems like an iPaaS. What would your kind of vision be if a customer said, well, we want to connect these two systems together, they both have an API? Would you go for RPA and leverage the tools that an RPA vendor provides for that specific purpose? Or would you recommend the customer more to go to like an iPaaS platform? Or would you just build a direct integration between the systems?
Yeah, so I think for us, like coming from the automation space, like we don't have that huge budget to just connect two systems and like see how that works. This is usually something where then the, let's say, IT of a client jumps in, does something. So we would be relying on the tool's capabilities itself, more or less. So we identified, for example, let's say UiPath as a tool to suit this use case. So now we have two options. We have the API and we have the UI to do something. And like as also our like knowledge of all these systems, like we see so many tools that are used somewhere in the industry has changed. We would now be way more likely to go for the API, do the at least reduce the error component that is the UI, that is something that is changing, not under our control, and go for the API integration. And then maybe just to make the use case, like, or the business case, look how valuable this is, to then bring in an IT department or whatsoever, like we built the prototype, and if this is making continuous money, if we have a valuable use case, then this is something that also the company itself can pick up, work with their resources, connect it, we can support on this, but usually we are the ones doing the process-related work. So
Quickly showing the ROI that they can possibly get. would be
showing
helpful.
showing the ROI, and then I think in terms of longevity from robots, from scripts, whatever is being implemented, like RPA isn't meant to be there forever. I think it's a nice vision, like your first girlfriend might be there forever, but times change, and I think this is the case also for RPA, because you have something, you do something, you prove something, and then like I think we heard it before. How do I show from now on that this thing is still valuable?
Yeah.
Where I have to put a lot of maintenance work. Now we have S4, everything changed, and this bot will never create the value because it wasn't meant to be maintained continuously. So
That makes a lot of sense. I had a next question, but now I'm curious about the whole first girlfriend thing. I wouldn't do that to you here. We'll talk about that later. But so you've said, okay, RPA has its place. We would go for the API integration more. We showed the ROI very quickly, and we tried to prove to the business that there is value in creating I would say, a true integration between several systems, which is absolutely true. And I wonder, for us, I talked about it earlier when I was talking about how generative AI is influencing the way people perceive intelligent document processing, even process mining to some extent. We've also heard about, process mining can give you that insight. IDP can help you understand your documents. Nonetheless, I would almost say like it's not interfering. I think it's creating a different kind of perception. How would you say that all of the news, all the hype cycle around generative AI is influencing your customers that you talk to? Because you talked about the end-to-end automation. How is that influencing them? Do you think that it's also something that's going to solve that part of their business for them, or are they already more educated to understand that the end-to-end is not something you can do with Gen AI? How is that influencing the whole buying cycle? I'm actually curious about that.
I think the end-to-end is like, it's not the scope that you say like, okay, I just ask GPT something or ask it to do something and this will cover everything. So the understanding is always like there could be parts within the process where this can be leveraged. But the thing is also that most of the clients that are currently looking for something in this space, if you ask them, as you said, what's the purpose? It's usually like, yeah, to have it. And then it's like, what are the next steps? Where are you continuing from that? So this is something that we are, I would say, also working on basically together with the client. So what is then your AI strategy from here? How are you moving on in this space? But I think what the general distribution did, at least what I also see in the IDP space when we're working in this, as people get their hands on ChatGPT, as they have to ask it queries, as they see what happens to a machine learning model when you don't really tell it what you want, when you don't tell it properly like what to give you and what will come out of it. So they get a better understanding of this back and forth. So they also have like a more, and it's easier to talk to them about like, this data isn't coming out of this document because look at the document, look at the query in this case that we have, and there's more understanding for technical complexity.
Yeah, and like we talked about it today too, that the market is starting to become educated. It's interesting that you said, give it a shot, let them try it and see what happens, because for example, we've had a very simple exercise where we asked one of our customers that were raving about the fact that ChatGPT can do everything. We asked them to do the same thing, use the same query, use the same document 5 times, and it got 2 different answers out of those 5 answers. So the consistency is definitely important, and that's exactly what you can expect from these types of technologies. Now, you made a very good point earlier about, we have the whole hype cycle. We want to get our customers to the plateau of productivity. That's also where we want to go. And you asked me the question, do you think if we give them more access, we give them more capabilities and actually to touch it, to better understand it, we will shorten the amount of time that we're actually in the dark ages, to call it that. If you were to, embark on a customer journey, right? They haven't touched anything that has to do with artificial intelligence. Where would you tell them to start? What would be the first step in their AI journey according to your perspective, knowing the entire landscape, including IDP and everything else? Where would you tell them to go and start?
I think from the perspective where we are coming from, it is still, like on the one hand, it would be the RPA bit, because it gives you a sense of what is the process, what are the parts of my processes that you need to know, that the systems you're interacting with. Like clicking in SAP doesn't mean clicking in SAP, it means like databases in the back end being triggered, giving you information, showing it, making it visible, so to understand what's happening in a broader context and in the systems in the back end. And then obviously what we do a lot and what we also see a lot is that for us it was always like there's RPA, then there might be IDP, then there might be chatbots, process mining. So you're moving through the technologies, and with that you're kind of like maturing, learning more about how it works. So what we see a lot right now is that we're directly moving to IDP, because these are the big use cases. These are the ones where people spend a lot of time, and there's no better case than just putting an actual tangible document on the table and saying, let's discuss this problem.
Yeah.
So you see it, you can feel it. You can feel it pain even touching an invoice that's been marked and crossed out and somebody's writing something on it. So it's a cool starting point. And then I think from there, it's really the make this data valuable and think about what is your next step. Is it timeline? Is it process mining in general? Will it be a large language model, or just storing the data so you can use it later on? And then I think this is where you would start like the AI journey from my perspective, because what we see, and I think that's a pretty cool example, also related to ABBYY, where we often like found a bigger problem in the background is connected to the master data and then just match all the additional information, enrich your document, and you ask the client like, hey, what's about your master data? Is it good? Because just in case, you know, and they say it's perfect, it's best. And then you connect the tool and it starts looking for IBANs, it starts looking for names, streets, whatsoever, and it's just 5 times in the system. Wrong IBAN, document not matching, and you see all of that stuff. And then if you think about taking this data, giving it to a large language model, and really asking it stuff about like, hey, how many vendors do you have in Munich? And it's telling you 1,000, and you're like, wow, we're the biggest supplier in Munich, but actually we just have 10.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because that takes me back to almost every single conversation when you get to the point that you want to take you know, this kind of process around documents into production. Every single customer is giving me that answer too. Our master data is absolutely perfect up until the point you actually start processing, and they see, well, this is not getting the accuracy levels or the straight through processing levels that we want, and you know, of course they blame us. As they usually do. But then you start looking at the details, and you really see you've got 10 times the same vendors. There's 25 ABBYYs in there. There's 35 Roboyos. Everybody's after their data in a different way, and that really does bring me back to my point earlier when I was talking about how companies are trying to leverage generative AI and trying to get to the end of the road without having the actual proper data. Because imagine that you were to ask that question. If you were to ask a different question, give me the ABBYY number for Roboyo. It might give you the one from 5 years ago, because there's 35 different options. If you don't have the right data in the right places, stored and consistent and accurate, that makes a huge amount of difference when you're actually going to start leveraging those technologies. So I would agree with you when you say, you know, IDP is one of the first things that you should probably look at when starting on the AI journey, because it falls all within the right categories. And the ROI is great. I mean, I don't know if you have an example that you want to share today in terms of, you know, you've worked with Vantage, you said, you know, you're part of the IDP team within Roboyo. What is for you like the greatest success story that you've been able to achieve with your customers that of course you can talk about, where IDP and perhaps even Timeline, you know, played a pivotal role in making that, you know, ROI, getting to that point very quickly? And if there's something that pops into your mind when I ask you that question.
So basically no, because this, I think the IDP, especially the IDP, it opens up so many possibilities in terms of if you come from the RPA space. So it's a very narrow space that is like taking this small process step. And now you come and you want to implement an IDP system. And I think what you also know about like what is linked to that. Like there's training, there's master data, there's all these formats, there's business users in the center of your process. And this is something that you cannot, like the ROI in my perspective, or also from the Roboyo, like I'm the guy implementing it, I want to make my life and your life and everybody's life easier. is not saying like, cool, now we have 100K, so what are we gonna do with it? But now we have a lot of insights, we have a lot of facts for everything else. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about like how we can work together with our clients, with our suppliers, how we can structure our master data, how can we build this system. This is basically then, again, the vision, AI, and this needs to work somehow, everything needs to be in place. How can we build this system? And I think this is, for me, the strongest case for IDP, because it gives you finally an entry point to talk about all of that.
Yeah.
To someone in an informed way about an easy topic like an invoice.
So that's really interesting, and I think that's absolutely the right way to look at it. But you said, it's a really great entry point, and a lot of our customers, and your customers, I think as well, start with invoices because it's such an apparent business case that's easy to make and is a great return on investment. Where do you see your customers then going next? And what I always tell our customers when I talk to them about Vantage is, look, you can start with invoices, it works out of the box, it's amazing. And then there's 65 other types of documents that you can start looking at. And strangely enough, at least for me, it always seems that it goes in every single direction. I don't know if that's the same with you when after you've done that first business case, the first use case with Vantage, where do customers typically go next? Is that a specific other department? Do they go into other types of financial areas, or where does it typically go? Because that's also a question that we get a lot. So what should we look at next? I'm asking the expert now.
I think from this perspective, like starting off with accounts payable, easy case, basically the most pressuring one, and then you have a lot of connected stuff like an invoice without an order wouldn't exist. So basically, then you have like an order confirmation, then you deliver your product, so you have the delivery note on that, and this is usually where like you're trying to get your way through the most common documents. But then what we see is like where it ends is after these 4 or 5 use cases that everybody knows, has seen, that's like it's common knowledge, like delivery note, everybody knows it because you just have it at home from your last IKEA order or something, so it's there. And then the question is what's happening after that? And I think this is often the point also from our perspective where you need to step in as a guide, because the table will turn and they will come with use cases that are not doable, and then you're going into the basically the depth of why is this not doable, why is handwriting not doable, and things like that. So this is where you as a consultant, as a COE, or also maybe just as a user, a client, need to step up and say, I think that's not the best case.
Yeah.
And where it should be going, or where I see it going also is, and I think Vantage has a great capability for that, is the document, like upload any document and I will tell you what's next in me.
Yeah.
And like having this distributed across your departments, your business users, you will see what are they uploading, what is their most frequent document that they put into the system to see if there's something to solve it. But then still, I think there's a lot of structured data, so it should, or semi-structured documents, say like that. It should stay in this area for some time to really fix all these surrounding problems that you have, and then you can jump into topics like contracts or whatever might be there in this unstructured area. But I think it's especially for the teams that want to push this topic to keep everybody kind of a little bit on the leash, because otherwise it's as we said, so I saw in your presentation, jumping to the finish line.
Jumping to the finish line before taking all necessary steps and making sure you can get there instead of just trying to jump in. No, that's great. I would totally agree with that. So last question for today, and I think it's a perfect time to be thinking about those kind of things. So recently somebody asked me, Max, what are your 3 predictions for 2024? And some of them came back in my presentation. I said, well, people are going to start to realize that smaller models is something that we're definitely going to have to keep looking at, and Gen AI is not going to solve everything. The whole premise of purposeful AI will come back into the picture after we've kind of forgotten about it. And there was a third one which slips my mind at the moment. But my question to you is, so Fabian, that's the last one for today. What would be your predictions? 1, 2, 3 predictions for next year. What is your focus? What do you see as happening in the next couple of months that will probably change the way we interact, or change the way that people interact with you, with your company? What are you thinking of? What's on your mind right now?
So I think like it will definitely shift more towards like the data-driven approach. So that means we have to look at the data first before we are moving, because now I think maybe all of you already experienced the pain of finding out data is not good too late. So it's more transparent way to start. The Gen AI thing, even though it's not really clear where it creates its most value,
Yeah.
I think it's getting distributed more. It's also getting distributed more in the like company context to find the cases, find whatever is useful. Is it a copilot just? Is it maybe, I don't know, write me something, even though the energy costs are too high, it could still be beneficial or worth it. And then still, and I think this is the thing, like the small language models also. You can also ask my colleague Ruben, he's currently working on topics like that. What is the purpose? What do you want to have? Because it just doesn't make sense to have everything of it.
Yeah.
You need something because you're working in a certain context. So why would I want a model to know about the history of the United States someone in 1800s when I just want to know how many invoices did I pay last year and how many did I not pay? So
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that absolutely aligns. So, with that, I don't know if there's any questions from the audience on the discussion we just had. Otherwise, thank you, Fabian, very much for having this discussion with me and for joining us today. So, any questions? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Sergey to wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabian. Thank you very much.